What if the way you've been telling your life story reveals the secret to what is holding you back? Stories play an integral part in how we see not only ourselves, but the whole world. Stories are more than just an important part of communication. They also reveal hidden aspects of our inner talk, which can either support us or end up holding us back from the very things we want most in life, without us even realizing it. Join author, mindset coach, and award-winning singer-songwriter Carrie Rowan on her show, Look for the Good, every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. when she shares nuggets of wisdom from her internationally best-selling book, Tell a New Story, 5 Simple Steps to Release Your Negative Stories and Bring Joy to Your Life. Carrie's powerful stories and compelling guests will empower you to change how you look at your own life while giving you some powerful tools and tips you can use every day to help you feel better and move yourself closer to the life you've been longing to live.
Welcome to Look for the Good. I'm your host, Carrie Rowan, Mindset Energy Coach. And here we are on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You can listen online on your mobile device or ask Alexa to play Dream Vision 7 radio. To learn more and for a full schedule, go to dreamvision7radio.com and get our apps. And thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited and can't wait to introduce our special guest to you in a moment. And we're going to talk about something really cool today. And before we get started, I just wanted to mention, as we do every week on Look for the Good, we're always looking for the good in situations. We're looking for the good in our lives. You know, our brains are so beautifully predisposed to look for what's wrong. That's just the way we're all programmed. And we're all the same in that tendency. So when we can retrain that brain to look for what's good and what's working, it's amazing how we can shift our whole life. And I love talking about that because there's so many different aspects of that and a lot of different avenues that we can go down to talk about looking for the good and how it affects our wholeness. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How to look at different energies within our lives to give us more wholeness, more juice, more vitality, more joy for life, right? Because that is what we're here for, isn't it? We want to live with joy. We want to feel good in our bodies, in our minds, in all of our relationships. We just want to feel good in this world. And that's what we do here. We're going to show you some really cool ways to do that. And wholeness is something you get when you own all of yourself, right? Because we are so many different things. We're all many different things. But when we can come into our life aligned and feeling aligned with who we are meant to be, with our natural tendencies and the things that bring us joy, because again, that's what we're here for, is to find those things. And when we can live with that alignment meaning, you know, when you set an intention for your life, your intentions line up with your behaviors, which line up with what you end up doing. And it's a full circle, right? And to incorporate all of our energies, the good or the bad when it comes, and to know what to do with that when those things happen. That's what we love to talk about here. And my guest, Sunshine Beeson, is so happy to be here today. I'm so excited to have her on. And we saw each other recently. I was like, you have to come on my podcast because you have so much good to share with people. And I love how she gets really to the root cause of what is causing any sort of upset in your life, or physical, mental, spiritual. And she really helps any of those emotional struggles that we have, which is really where a lot of our triggers come from, right? And any of these perpetual health concerns that you have. And she loves to help you experience authentic transformation. And she's committed to take you on an inward journey to total wellness, because we are whole and we're talking about our wholeness. You have to be aligned in all those aspects of your life. And I love how she has a 4-step approach to what she does. And she's going to talk about that. And we're really going to focus on a really cool thing today. We're going to talk about embracing and integrating our masculine and our feminine energies, right? And instilling those in ourselves. And that doesn't just mean male, female. I'm just talking about our energies and our tendencies. And Sunshine's going to elaborate on that for us. So welcome, Sunshine. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm excited to be here too.
Thank you. I really just felt like our work is very complementary to each other, you know, and I just love, you know, we talked about the what you do and how you help people get to the root cause and how you help people transform. And I'd love to know a little bit more about the why, because you have this really cool thing that not a lot of people know about. It's called spiral iridology. And can you tell us a little bit about what exactly that means so that my listeners can understand that?
So, iridology is an assessment tool analyzing the iris of the eye for physical and emotional health. It's actually like a blueprint to your soul, just like your fingerprint. No two eyes are alike, not even in twins. So there's a plethora of information that goes to many, many depths of who you are as a human.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, they do say the eyes are the window to the soul. And so I love that. And actually, I was lucky enough to have a reading with you at one point, and it was truly fascinating just the depth of information you can get by studying somebody's iris. It's truly, truly remarkable. Tell us a little bit about the types of information and how does that relate to their overall wellness?
Well, we can see 3 generations back, 3 generations forward, and that means ancestral genetics. It also means what types of emotions are being held if we don't clear that. And what I mean by that, Carrie, is when I see people that are about to have a family, I say it's really, really important. We've got to clean up not only physically, but emotionally. We got to do the 4 domains: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. I will give you a quick example. I did twins' eyes that were 8 months old, boy girl twins, and I said to the parents, I was looking at the little boy, and I said to them, he's going to have some lymph issues. Do not give this child gluten or dairy. And on the emotional level, I saw that the father was holding some angst and anger towards his mother, which is the child's grandmother, and that was going to be displayed at about 2 years old. He was going to start having these anger emotions coming up because it was unresolved with his father. When he was 2, he actually had a congested lymph node in his neck and had to have surgery because the dad was giving him gluten and dairy. The dad also had some unresolved issues with his mother. So the kid was now starting to display these issues of anxiety and anger emotions. That's just one little tip.
Wow. Well, that's enormous. There's so much depth in there, right? You've mentioned multi-generational things happening. You've mentioned stuff within the family, and it's amazing how the parents can carry some of that and how it affects the children on such a deep level. I just think that's super, super powerful for people to understand and uncover that so they can do something about it, right? Before that child grows into adult and he carries that with him the whole time. And what you're doing is sort of breaking that generational pattern, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah, I followed some families previously where looking at children's eyes and telling them the predispositions that could happen. And I tracked some of these kids for a few years, and the parents would stay in touch with me and say, you know what, this is starting to happen, but you've given me the tools. You've given me the tools now to carry it forth so that these aspects don't even happen, these
That's
deficiencies.
wow, that's super, super powerful. Because as we know, and you talk about this as well, epigenetics, the new study of epigenetics says just because you have a gene or a trait does not necessarily mean that it's going to be expressed. The old environment versus hereditary, right? Now we know that just because you have it, it's more your environment. And also what's going on in this inner environment. I think when we think of environment, we usually think of outside of ourselves, but really our inner environment, I think, is the most important piece.
Absolutely. And I say you're not married to your genetics, that we have the ability now to shift the neurotransmitters in the brain, to retrace, go back, re-imprint, recalibrate. And that's the other piece of the work that I do with I do alchemy hypnotherapy, but I have my own system called HypnoCore Release, where it's going down to the root core cause. That's where I get down to the root core cause of what's happening with people's surface anxiety, stress, depression, continued struggles that they're not getting any resolve with. And when we go down to the depths of that, to the subconscious, then real change can take place.
That is so powerful. I just love it because you get right to it. You can go around it and do therapy for many years, but you never really get right to it. And I love how you marry all those things together as you're talking about. And I'm a big believer in hypnotherapy because that's how I use that for birthing.
Mm.
And I loved it. And it really helped me get, what I wanted out of the experience and feel like I had some power in the situation where you really sort of feel kind of out of control.
Yes, exactly.
So I still go back and use those skills. That's how powerful. I had a dentist one time do a filling on me using my hypnobirthing. They all thought I was crazy in the office, but I'm like, no, I'm fine. It's just a little one. I don't like the Novocaine. I'd rather just do my hypnobirthing well in the chair. So I know how powerful that is. It's a very powerful modality. How would you say somebody's thoughts, somebody's feelings, some of these stories that we're telling ourselves inside of that inner environment, how does that come out? How does that affect some of these ailments and some of these dis-eases, if you will, that you see come into your office?
Well, I love how you're saying the stories because, the ego part of our self that is all about survival, we've got the stories, right? And those stories have served some people for a time, but then we outgrow those stories, and it's difficult because it's familiar. So when we're trying to make some changes, the changes are sometimes a little bit difficult until those changes become the familiar, right? The unfamiliar becomes the familiar. And then we have the ability to shift those stories. The mind is so incredibly powerful. And as you know, I mean, I think we're both into law of attraction and how the mind thinks and what we're making up. And there's an energy to everything we think. And so that thought becomes a behavior, the behavior becomes a reality. And we can shift that, right?
I love that. That's super powerful. Making the unfamiliar more familiar. It's like, being comfortable with being, let's get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's when we make the strides. That's where we embrace change. If there's something that we want to change in our lives, we have to step into that unknown or that uncomfortable until it becomes the known, the familiar. I love that. It's super
Yes.
powerful. It's the
Yeah.
only place change really happens. So, yeah, and those stories that we have, they're always there. And I always tell people as you start to do this work and you start to kind of uncover those stories and identify what they are and start writing them down, sort of, I call it capturing, you're catching those stories, then it's really important to be kind to ourselves. And I'm sure you tell this people as well. As they start to say, oh, wow, why have I been telling that story? It's just an awful story, when you realize that the story is just making you feel worse about the bad things that already happened. And so I always tell people it's important to have self-compassion because stories always serve a noble purpose.
I love that so much, Carrie, because one of the places that I take my clients after we've done some of this hypnocore release work, and we do this through the subconscious, there's so much lack of self-acceptance and lack of self-love. This whole thing of not enoughness in our world today, right? Especially for women. This is third chakra stuff, and I'll talk more about that when we talk about the masculine and feminine. But it's so important to come to this place of that love for self, that self-acceptance. And we have to, well, my process of doing that in my experience is when we can access those younger parts, it's the younger parts of us that are holding on to those imprinted patterns, those beliefs.
Oh, that's powerful. Really, I love that. The younger parts of ourselves that's holding on to that stuff. Because it gets imprinted at such a young age. We're not even conscious of it. And I say this to people all the time as well. Like, you probably made up that story when you're 3, 4, 5, or 6 years old. How is that still serving you today in your life? And
Yeah.
that's what we have to go back and look at. And what I found to be one of the most incredible things to me, an aha moment to me when I was doing this work, is that most people don't realize they have a choice.
Completely. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, A, I didn't realize I was telling that story, and B, I never knew I could change that. I had somebody say that to me after one of my seminars. She's like, I never knew I could change that story. You just assume this is the way it's going to be. This is just the chatter in my head. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yes. I say the mind is like a puppy that needs to be trained.
It's so true.
Is that we have thousands of thoughts per minute. So how do we manage it? We've got to be able to manage it.
And the interesting thing is 85% or 90% of those thoughts are the same ones we had yesterday.
Yes.
Or like stuck on repeat. I always use the analogy of the album, right? I'm dating myself here. The vinyl album, when it would get stuck in the groove, you'd have to go over and either tap the machine, give a little bang to get it off of it. And it's kind of the same thing with our minds. They just keep repeating the same things over and over until we say, hey, wait a second, no longer.
I love that analogy so much. I'm borrowing that because I'm all about analogies and metaphors. So that is perfectly said.
Thank you. Yeah, stuck in the groove. Well, as a musician, I like everything musical. We talk about groove and, patterns and melody and that, because it's all so relevant and people understand that type of a thing.
Yeah.
Except for the younger kids that don't even own CDs. So
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So I love where we're headed with this. This is super powerful. And let's talk a little bit about the energies. You mentioned the chakras. I love the chakra systems as a Reiki master myself. And I think people it's becoming more common language, I've noticed out there. But, let's talk a little bit about the energies, because everything's energy. We're all energy. Everything in our house is energy. The words we put out into the universe, we're sending energy out. And so how would you describe masculine, feminine? Because we're not talking about male, female, as I mentioned.
That's right. So I like to say that there is with the masculine or the feminine energy, there is a shadow side, and then there is a sacred or divine side or aspect to that. And I'm going to give some examples. So if we took the shadow feminine, let's say, and these are kind of like archetypical beings within us. So and again, I really want to reference that we can have a male in that gender that is in his shadow feminine, and what these aspects are. Jealousy is a shadow, blame, being victim, the overpleaser. I say there's an overpleaser part or a rescuer part that we have within us. When we've got low self-worth, when we're not feeling enough. And all of this, I really reference or relate to third chakra, right? Because that's where our personal will and our identity lands. And our identity gets so slashed when we're growing up. We're not really seen for who we are, or we have personal will that was cut down maybe by our adults or parents or school teachers, whomever it may be, where we start to get those imprints or those feelings. The shadow masculine would be phrased of somebody that's, when they're in that shadow masculine, it's all about controlling, wanting to overpower, condescending, competition, unhealthy competition. Now, there's healthy competition where you're striving within yourself to meet your own goals. But when you're cutting and being deceitful about somebody else and not wanting to see them succeed, then that is an unhealthy competition. So greed, overdoing, being in judgment, these are some of the aspects. Overwhelm. And I see a lot of these traits in the shadow masculine in many women that are entrepreneurial, because they go to this overdrive of trying to succeed so much, and then the overdoing this, they go into overwhelm, they're overstressed, the anxiety comes in, and their masculine energy starts to really dominate. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is the divine feminine which is all about trust, receiving, allowing, pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
sacredness, creating ceremony, grace, yielding, compassion. That starts, the divine feminine inside goes to sleep. Whether you be male or female, the divine feminine goes to sleep. So it's hard to receive, right? The divine masculine, some of the attributes about divine masculine are about being protective, protecting, having vision, taking the right steps of action, knowledge. Now, wisdom is divine feminine, knowledge is divine masculine. Strength of character is a divine masculine trait. Purpose, soul, intention, logic, and being loyal. And it's the feminine energy that creates. The masculine energy is the grounded force. It's actually in the void, it's consciousness. But when we have within us, I do a process where we create a divine interaction, a divine marriage that I call the integration, because we're always seeking, I'm going to say these terms here, we're either horizontal or vertical. We've got to integrate both. And the first one needs to be coming in preferably vertical. That means your core root divine connection as above, so below, your spiritual connection grounded to the earth. Now, in our society, we mostly go straight out horizontal, expecting our needs to be fulfilled and met by others. And then we're in a crisis about that. So when we can have balance within us, where we understand these aspects and behaviors of the masculine and feminine energy, we are more integrated. And that way we can go forth being whole to ourselves first, being self-full, not selfish. We've got a more balanced relationships with life, with our business, with our partners, with our family.
That is the most beautiful description I've ever heard of that phenomenon of our energies. Very beautiful. And it just, all I kept thinking was exactly what you just said, making that relationship, the vertical line, the most important thing, because your relationship with yourself is the most important relationship you're ever going to have, right? And if you can't get that right, you're not getting all the other ones around you right, because if that one's faulty, then everything, when you're looking for that horizontal line, which was so beautiful the way you said that, we're always looking, because let's face it, this world is externally focused. Everything around us, our phones, our houses, the cat crying at my door right now, we're all externally focused. That's right. And it's so we need to make that decision first, to know that we do have the choice as to what we focus on, and bring that to that vertical line, which is being in alignment, which we talked about earlier, and what you just mentioned. And so what were you going to say? It's really beautiful.
I was just gonna say, when we're focused so much on the horizontal, what happens is that we attract in people into our lives where you're meeting each other in your wounded spaces. Eventually those wounded spaces start to come up. Those inner children are going to be attracted to each other, right? Until we come to conscious awareness that, this is a place where some healing could happen. Right. And when we've got that consciousness and we come to that place of healing, then the neediness, right? That is the neediness, which is a shadow feminine aspect, doesn't raise its head that way.
I love that. That's really beautiful. And we're going to break right here, guys. I know you're hanging on her every word, but don't go anywhere. Just a word from our sponsor. Hold tight. We're just talking about one of the shadow emotions of neediness on the feminine side, and how that affects us when we start meeting people, when we meet people in relationships, when we're in that negative state, how does that affect our relationships? And that's kind of where we left off. And how can healing happen from that?
So it is interesting who is coming into our field, I like to say. Who are we energetically attracting? Because we all, like we've spoken earlier, Carrie, we're frequency, we're vibratory beings. Everything is vibration. And if we have dominant, what I'm going to say, shadow pieces, parts of us that are buried, okay, because these parts are not always conscious or prevalent, then after some time, or maybe even in the beginning when we're attracting into a relationship, we're going to be met, each of the couples are going to be met with their what I'm going to call their wounded parts, okay? Maybe their young parts that have had adopted different imprints and beliefs, especially ones around worthiness and not feeling enough. So then what happens when we don't feel enough in ourselves, then we are seeking, the neediness starts to go outward, and we're trying to have that other being, that other person, give us what we think is that we're lacking, because there's a gap in there.
That's really, that's so powerful. It makes me think of the movie, where she says, "You complete me." Um, and we wrote a song. My partner wrote a song about that. It was a farcy little song about the fact that nobody completes you. We complete ourselves, right? We are the only ones that can fill in that empty piece, that void that we feel like we have. Which is why we turn into the needy, which is why we turn into the controlling and all those things that we do in relationship. And so, how does this lead people to healing? What if people with a victim story, as I always call it, and I call it in my book, they're hanging on to that victim story, woe is me, it affects their self-esteem, they have this self-worthiness issue, or a lot of people overachieve because they feel like they're not enough. It's got to be the next this, the next certificate on the wall, the next whatever it is. How do you heal from that if you find yourself already attracting people like that in your life? Where can you find healing in there?
I love what you're segueing into. And what I want to back up for a second is I actually use that example of that movie.
You do.
Completely, because oh my gosh, that just gets me. Like, no, nobody completes you. You are complete already. So interesting that what you're saying about the certificates on the wall and having to overproduce like that. When I'm looking at somebody's eyes, I can see that where the way they were raised, the way that they are interpreting being visible, being seen, being loved, is because the parents or a teacher has instilled in them that it is so important to produce, to perform, to get good grades, to do the doing. And that becomes a part of their belief system, that and then become the over pleasers, by the way, as well. And so they're always seeking, like, I've got to prove it. I've got to prove myself. I've got to get that certification. I need another one because I don't believe that I'm ever, ever, ever enough. So then that's how the story goes. It just continues until we really are oversaturated with the excessive overdoing and going into overwhelm and overdrivenness.
That is so powerful. I know that song very well and that story very well. So I'm intimately connected to that one. And so we all have our thing, right? And like it takes that moment, that aha moment. And unfortunately, a lot of times, it comes from something happening, something catastrophic happening, or, I don't want to list catastrophic things, but a lot of times it's something physical that is our wake up. And I know for me, my body has talked to me a few times that way, like, hold on, you're going too fast, and so that's how for me it manifests. And I had a few health scares that I had to say, okay, I got to really look at my story around this stuff.
I love what you're saying, Carrie, because when many times people come to me for physical ailments, whether it's gut issues or skin problems, or even the emotional, the anxiety, and so forth, the physical part, here's how I like to say this. Our I'm going to get a little woo here, but on You know, we've got this auric field. You've all heard, everybody's heard of the aura. It's about 7 layers of frequency of energy to it. That's the first place where the leaks, tears, and holes happen. That's where the first piercing, I'm going to say, happens before we get it in our dense physicality. And that's part of the emotional body. That's the spiritual, emotional, energetics. That's where all of those belief systems are kind of hanging out before they get permeated into the depth of the physical. So when people are coming, you know, to heal something physical, it's like, okay, I always know that I'm going to say 95%, there is an emotional link. There's an emotional aspect connected to that physical. There's parts of our body, and it's very well known now, the mind-body connection. But in, you know, the lungs are a place that hold grief. The kidneys is fear. Our lymph system holds resentment, and our liver holds anger. So many of these emotions can stir up and be in any place in the body. So when I'm doing my hypnotherapy work, I'm accessing, first of all, layers of these emotions, and where are they? And like people are just blown away. Well, it's in my right leg. Okay, well, the right side of the body is the masculine energy,
Mhm.
and your father's ancestry, like the right eye. Okay, and the left eye, the left side of the body is the feminine, which holds the generational aspects of the mother. So the body, I mean, the body has so much language that it speaks to us, but the listening isn't there. And I think people are really awakening now more and more. The consciousness is really opening because people are very frustrated with mainstream when they've tried and tried, and there's a place for it, of course. But when we try to do a drug, you know, that's just covering up a symptom. And I am not a symptom person.
Right.
I want to get underneath. Let's get under it. One of my mottos is you can't get over it till you get under it.
Yes, I love that. Yes. And it's the chronic stuff. I've studied natural healing for a very long time, as you have, and it's the chronic things when you really have to stop and say, okay, this has been going on for a really long time. Because, like you said, there's a place for Eastern or for Western medicine. There's a place for each piece of it. If I have an emergency, I'm certainly going to go there. But for the chronic stuff, that's when we have to look inside. That's when we have to look at all the pieces, mind, body, spirit, what's happening, what's out of alignment. That's really where we can find the answers, like you said, in the listening. And when somebody decides that they're ready, and a lot of times with this kind of work, it comes to a point where something happens and they say, okay, I am listening, and they need someone like you, a practitioner that can really bridge that gap between what is possible from a healing standpoint sometimes versus what they were taught to believe.
Yeah. And the thing too, Carrie, is, you know, here's sometimes what happens. I might see, let's say, a woman, and I'm doing an iridology session, and she's loving it so much, and it all makes sense. She goes, I have to have my husband come. And I say, okay, wait. What's really important here is he has to want to. You've got to wanna, right? You got to
Yeah.
want to step into it. Otherwise, it's futile, right?
Agreed. It's so very personal. I can tell people I'm all excited about a lot of different things. But it has to be they're wanting, just like you said, you have to come to the table. I'm ready to change. I'm sick of whatever it is that I've been struggling with. And the same thing with all of our work, right? I mean, somebody doesn't just wake up someday and say, hey, I've got a really bad story. It's sort of coming to that conclusion that you got to get out of your own way. I love using that statement, right? Getting ourselves out of our own way, because our body really does know what to do. I mean, look at Louise Hay's work. It just really correlates with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Each piece of our body, each ailment always has an emotional aspect to it, if you will, and a story that sits behind that, right? And that's what I love unraveling. Okay, that's great. Let's get behind. What is that story? Like you say, get underneath that. What's the story that you tell yourself about what happened? And in that, there's a lot of clues because there's a lot of belief systems that sit behind those stories and what we say to ourselves, which affects us on a daily level very deeply.
And you know what I find so fascinating? I mean, this is my 41st year of doing this work, and I still love it so much because I'm so fascinated by the innate intelligence and wisdom of the body. But within the body, I like to say our bodies are like a home. And in this home, there are lots of rooms with closed doors. And whom is occupying those spaces are all the different ages of us. It could be an infant, a 5-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old. And those are the parts of ourselves that hold those stories. But there's such wisdom when we can access and give those inner kids their voice. And I call them fragmented parts of self. And then when we reintegrate those parts of selves and they get to have their voice, oh my gosh, life becomes so ecstatic and pleasurable. And the integration brings so much joy and relief that I say there's either two things happening. You're either in life in reaction or you're in response. Reaction, of course, is the triggers, and response is, oh, life is easy and feeling good, and I feel so free.
I love that. Those need versus those knee-jerk reactions. I talk about that a lot because I feel like meditation grows that space in you. So you have a second to decide, do I want to respond or do I want to react in my old unconscious ways? And so that's really, really powerful. This is a really great point. We're going to take a quick little break here. Don't go anywhere. I know you're loving this conversation. Come right back. We'll be right with you. Welcome back to Look for the Good. I'm here with my special guest today, Sunshine Beeson, and we're having an incredible conversation. And we're talking about masculine and feminine energies. And we just left off, and we're going to talk about how do you know when enough is enough? When is it you just throwing up your hands and you're like, I need a different way. I need to start healing. I know something's off. When does that happen, Sunshine?
So oftentimes I'll have people come to me. It's almost like a last resort because they may have tried many different types of therapies, which I always acknowledge. I say it's never a waste of time. I don't put down any other therapies. I say there's value to everything if you're striving to really better yourself as a human being. And it's when they are having struggles in their family, either with their children, they're not getting along with their kids or their spouse. There's arguments every day. It's creating such stress, or even in their business, or even I even help people with money issues. So we've got because that's a whole nother topic of energy of money, a whole nother entity, I'd say. So they come because they're at the point of their wit's end, right? And what I love so much is that I give them hope, right? I give them some hope, and they're really ready, because I really like to work with people that are ready to step in 100%, because I'm going to give 150% to have them see results and to really, really embrace the change. And again, talking about the familiar and the unfamiliar, and guide them, hold their hands, and have them feel safe enough that they can really explore the deepest depths of what is happening that they've stuffed down, like in those rooms that we had talked about. Another analogy I like to use is that some of these emotions get packed away, like in a suitcase. The suitcase just keeps filling up, and it's about to burst open at the seams. And that's also the time when people have felt like, okay, I've had enough, right? I need to do something different. And so I feel like I'm at the enough of a difference because not many people have heard of iridology before, especially on the East Coast. So it's a really great different kind of offering that works well with so many different other therapies that are out there.
And you offer so much, just what you bring to the table, and And I love that. And you said I'm giggling about the suitcase that's going to bust, because I always call it the emotional backpack. So I think about putting it on the backpack, and it's so heavy. It's like ready to burst at the seams because, it's emotional stacking, not in a good way. You can do it in a positive way, stack your emotions if you want to start feeling better, but you can also stack that stress and negativity. And if you don't have a way to release it, you're in deep doo-doo, as we say, because it's just going to come out all over everybody else in a way that you don't want, that you'll feel bad about after.
I love that. Gosh, you and we're into the analogies. I love what you just said, because what I express to my clients at times, because they're so tired, the fatigue. I mean, my God, I see such adrenal fatigue in young people too these days. I mean, teenagers to their 20s. That is one of the organs that is so maxed out in our world today, is the adrenal glands, the endocrine system. And I say, these emotions, they're like concrete, brick weight that are going to be so heavy. So that's what's causing, part of the fatigue and the tiredness and listlessness.
Yes, that's so powerful. Good, you're gonna laugh when I say this. So one of the things my husband loves to say, and I talk about this in my signature talk, is drop the bag of bricks. Right?
Yeah.
If I bring up something, he's like, drop the bag of bricks. So it's such a visual. Like I even have, a slide for it with a guy like, oh, you think about dragging this bag of bricks around. And it's exhausting, because that's where we just stuff all that stuff, the heavy stuff that we don't want to deal with, that we pretend is not there. It's
Yes,
going somewhere if you're not processing your emotions.
exactly. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, we do love the analogies, metaphors.
Yeah.
But you need to give someone concrete
Yeah.
information, like something people want, something that they can relate to, that understand. And I
Yeah.
think brains immediately get that they can just link right up quickly. So if you were to give somebody some advice, if you were to, some of these younger people maybe that are coming to you with this adrenal fatigue, which is really sad because that affects everything. I've had that before and had to work hard to get it back to where it was. What advice would you give people? What's one thing that they could do every day for themselves on their own until
Mm.
they're ready to come and see you, to make themselves feel just a little bit better? What would be a piece of advice?
I think the thing that really creates shift so immediately is what we do every day naturally, that we do when we're first born, and that's to breathe. And most people, they breathe so shallow. It's the upper chest. And so there's many different types of breathing out there. My husband and I, besides the sacred sexuality, we do breath workshops for people, because people are not breathing. And there's one simplistic breath that I love to share with people. And that's where, and you're going to slow everything down, but you're going to inhale for a count of 4. You hold the breath for a count of 4, and you exhale for a count of 6. There's many of these variation types of breathing, but I say time it on your phone for 1 minute and you will have a shift. The other thing is, if you're stressful while you're driving and you're at a light, or you don't even have to be at a light, but Carrie, you're going to love this because you're a voice person, doing chants. And I don't know if you've heard of doing the vowel chants, AEIOU, but you take a big breath and you say each of those vowels and you just let it, just get it out there. That's going to create an immediate shift too.
I love that, of course. And as a singer, as I'm thinking, that's why singing and music is so healing, because you're doing that deep, diaphragmatic breathing all the time. And I love that. You just gave 2 really simple things. And that's what I love about this kind of work, is the simpler, the better, because these simple things over time cause huge transformation, right?
Yes.
And it's like nature. It's like there's nothing complicated. I mean, there are some complicated things if you want to talk about, way up in the sky, but things are pretty simple out here when I look around. When I go out into my yard, trees just grow every year. It's very simple. And when we can go back to what's most simple, most of the laws of the universe are based on simplicity,
Yes.
right? And so you just gave us three really simple but powerful things if people will practice those. I love that. And the cool thing I love about breathing too is how that deep breathing, it inspires that vagus nerve to calm down,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
And I'm
Yeah.
always telling this to my daughter. She likes to hear, like, she's a singer too. And I know when she goes and starts singing, her anxiety level goes woo, way down. But if she's in her classroom and she can't break out into song, then I have her do some breathing and we talk about that vagus nerve that runs through her body. Because if you can calm that vagus nerve, everything just calms down automatically. And that's exactly what you're doing with both of those two things, right?
Yes, exactly.
And you don't have to know how it works. I always tell people, like they
Right.
always, like even with meditation, I love talking about how it works and why it works, but the same thing with a light bulb. You don't have to understand how the lights work to walk in here and flip the switch on the wall. I don't need to understand that. I just know that it works.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So tell us, where can they find more about you? I'm sure they're dying to find out more about iridology and perhaps even work with you. So where can we tell them to find you?
So my website is whatisidology.com, and iridology is spelled iridology. So whatisidology.com.
Beautiful. And we've been talking about the masculine and feminine energies. And I think you have a really fantastic course on that as well, if people want to dig into that deeper.
I do. I have a course, and it is called the Masculine Feminine, the Integration of the Shadow and the Sacred. And it's a 5-module pre-recorded informational study. And at the end of each module, there is actually a meditation process that helps you integrate each of the lessons.
Ooh, I love that. I really love that 5-module, because my book is based on a 5-step process with a meditation for each one of them. So I love that. I love that I think it's nice for people to have a variation on meditations, because there's so much to choose out there, and people, again, they want to complicate it and they're just not sure, where do I even start? Just start anywhere, and that's a great place to start. If you loved what Sunshine was talking about with the integration of the masculine and the feminine and the divine, and you also get the meditation with them, which is a really powerful thing. So I thank you so much for coming on today. This has been incredible talking to you today.
Had so much fun with you, Carrie. Thank you.
And if you want some more analogies, just go visit our website. And
Right.
what is iridology.com? And thank you for spelling that out for people, because it's iridology. And again, I had a reading with Sunshine. It was truly remarkable, and I learned a lot of really incredible things that I would not have otherwise known. So I highly recommend that. And thank you so much for listening today on Look for the Good. Stay tuned for more episodes coming up. And as always remember, it's never too late to live your best story. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a fabulous day.
Thanks for tuning in to Look for the Good with your host, Carrie Rowan, best-selling author and mindset coach. Join us every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. right here at Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. If you weren't able to catch an episode, no worries. Just visit our website to find all the archived episodes of Look for the Good on demand, so you don't miss a thing. And remember, it's never too late to live your best story. For additional resources or to find out about how you can work with Carrie directly, visit carrierowan.com for more details.